Welcome, friends, to another episode of Jack Amplified. I am your host, Michael Braithwaite. I have the absolute pleasure of being the CEO and president of Jack.org. But let me tell you something. Our team, a small but mighty team of about 50 people, do the heavy lifting, and even more so, the thousands of youth we support across Canada and beyond are really the power of this organization. It's the peer-to-peer piece, young people supporting young people, and that early intervention prevention around youth mental health and the journey through it that we are focused on in many, many different ways. Every other week here on Jack Amplified, we bring you a panel of amazing individuals, and we pick a topic. We drill down on it. We have our experts kind of weigh in on it with their lived experience. This week is no different. Today, of course, is Earth Day. But for many people, the day feels less like a celebration and more like a deadline. There's so much happening right now on the planet Earth that is causing a lot of anxiety. We want to talk about that today, what we call eco-anxiety. It's not just worrying about the weather. Although we do talk a lot about it, it is a conversation starter. It's really a fundamental shift in how young people view their future. And without further ado, I want to go over to the young people we have here with us today to introduce themselves. Ashley, I will ask you to start.
For sure. Thank you, Michael. So my name is Ashley, and I'm located on Algonquin Anishinaabe territory, which is also known as Ottawa. So I've been involved with Jack.org for 8 years now. I've been a I am a Jack Talk speaker. I've attended summits, and I was a chapter president for 2 years when I was back in university. I have an undergrad degree in international development and globalization, and I'm working towards my master's in global mental health and well-being. I work for the Mental Health Commission of Canada, and I coordinate mental health first aid courses as well as plan youth summits in high schools for the Headstrong program. And in my free time, I like to read, write, travel, and hang out with my cat, Marty.
I'm hearing all that. I don't think there's a lot of free time, but it sounds, I'm glad that Marty gets some attention. Thank you for that, Ashley. Wonderful. Chelsea, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Chelsea. I am from Six Nations of the Grand River Reserve, and I'm Mohawk. I earned my Bachelor's of Women and Gender Studies at Lakehead University, and then moved over to Winnipeg, where I've lived for the last few years here. I am the founder outside of this of Flowing for Change, which is a menstrual advocacy organization that works to increase menstrual equity, which just includes access to education and resources. And so this has been my passion project for quite a few years. So it's exciting to see that continue to flourish. I'm also so lucky to be a part of the Jack.org network in so many different ways. I'm a part of both of the speaker programs, so the Jack Talks and the Indigenous Facilitator. I also am on the Jack Talks Youth Voice Council and in the Ambassador Program. And then I'm so lucky to be asked to join in conversations like this. Thanks so much.
Very cool, Chelsea. And thank you so much for all the work that, well, all of you do, but thanks for talking so much and being so involved with Jack.org. It's so appreciated and it's impactful. Last but certainly not least, Brittany, we go to you. Tell us about Brittany.
Tansei kakea no wako magadak, Brittany Superdal Nitya Kasan, Muscatrius Kai Ganotinea, Maga Pagalmachis Kaya Teotinea. Gananaskomto now. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Brittany Superdal. I am a Métis Cree Two-Spirit person who currently lives in Treaty 6 territory in a Muscatrius Skaigan, also known as Edmonton. However, I'm originally from Treaty 8 territory, and I live in Paganmachis, also known as East Prairie Métis Settlement. And yeah, I am a international climate activist, and I specialize in centering Indigenous sovereignty and climate change mitigation. I'm also an author, and I wear a lot of hats. I also do advocacy work for 2S LGBTQIA plus Indigenous youth, and I sit on a national advisory board for implementing Métis-specific spaces in higher education institutes. And what else do? I do a lot of things.
There's no way you could get anything. I feel like I should be doing more after talking to the three of you or hearing from the three of you. I'm like, wow, man, I do not do enough. But this is, why we have such wonderful, you know what? I say it always gives me a lot of inspiration and hope because all of you are so passionate and dedicated to the work you do and making our world a better place. Uh, Ashley, let's talk about the weight of the climate emergency and how does it uniquely affect young people? How do you see climate news affecting young people's mental health?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it definitely affects our anxiety. I think a lot of youth are very anxious about the future and the climate and everything going on. And as well as they're scared, angry, kind of confused, don't really know how we fit. There's a lot of uncertainty and fear of what the planet will look like in the future. And with some news coming out being like, oh, are we going to run out of water? Is there not going to be clean air for us to breathe in how many years from now? Or if we want to have kids or things like that, like, do we bring in future generations, because will they have a livable planet? So I think there's a lot of all of that, the uncertainty. But we're fortunate that we live in a time where we have access to all this information, which is great, but it can also be a disadvantage because we have that constant negative news coming in, and that just helps fuel that anxiety, but and makes us feel a little bit powerless, and feel like there's not much that we can do. But at the same time, there is some stuff that we can do, and as much as it's like a lot of the climate emissions come from corporations and not necessarily individuals, that doesn't mean that our individual actions don't help as well. So I like to think of it as if we see an ocean, yeah, I might just be a little drop in that ocean, but without all those little drops, the ocean wouldn't exist. So we do have some power and agency over that, even if it sometimes feels like we don't.
And what a great lead into the next part is that, you know, uh, it's a lot, as you've outlined, right? For a young person, day in, day out, you're being bombarded with negative kind of thoughts and information, access to a ton of information. How do we kind of validate the anxiety, realize that it's there, without letting it turn into hopelessness? And you spoke a little bit about that, Ashley, but I throw it out to all of you. What do you recommend to young people uh, to do if they're dealing with eco anxiety?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think it's important to remember that as much as there is a lot of negativity and news that we're being shown on media, I think alternatively there is like a lot of good things that are happening in the same time and a lot of, new scientific discoveries, and we have new pictures of the moon and other planets, and so there's so many other things that are so exciting that we can, I think, find some release in and understand that like we can feel those things, but we don't actually necessarily have to wear them with us every single day. And we can sometimes leave that anxiety and those things and put them down somewhere and let other people around us kind of carry those things because um, we could spend our whole life being hopeless, or we can um, validate those feelings, feel those feelings with our friends in our community, and then we can, like Ashley said, kind of take those individual actions in the best way that we can to make those changes, and just find our way back to connection with community. I think is very important to do with these things. We're not meant to carry this all alone, so definitely connecting with each other.
Yeah, to add on to Chelsea's point, connection to community, I think, is incredibly important. In this modern colonial world that we exist in, we're kind of really taught to be individualistic and to really focus on ourselves and, to always put ourselves first and etc. Um, and to that tends to isolate us, especially when you add in social media and our phone addictions and everything. It can be really hard um, to feel any hope when you're scrolling and you interact with videos about like climate disasters and extreme climate events, and the climate crisis and everything. And then your algorithm pushes more videos and more posts towards you. And so then it just feeds into that anxiety. Best advice is just to get off the phone and to look around you, go to a park, interact with the nature around you. And most of all, most importantly, is to find a community around you too, to find others who maybe are feeling similar anxiety and talk about it. But also find ways that you can have hope, look at like city initiatives, in term and creating more green spaces. Like we just had this massive, like right outside my apartment, we had this massive like parking lot that was just empty for years. Now it's a beautiful green park in the middle of downtown Edmonton. And I think that's pretty great, because again, nature grounds all of us. And when we get off our phones, we stop feeling like the world is ending. That's what I've noticed personally.
Well said, both of you. We're going to go over to Chelsea. Um, so Indigenous youth have especially important relationship to the land and have a long history of leading the charge as land defenders. How do you see changes in the land affecting Indigenous young people, and what could climate and mental health advocacy center the voices uh, of Indigenous young people?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think as Indigenous people, and especially Indigenous youth, we are just inherently connected to the land. We speak a lot about our land and plant and animal relatives, and so that is just an inherent connection. And so it's natural, I think, even if you're not Indigenous, to just watch these massive tragedies and climate disasters happen and feel the weight of that. I think that it's so important, but especially as Indigenous people, that role on that connection to land is even bigger, and is something that I think is not new in how it's affecting Indigenous youth and Indigenous people in general. I think that we um, are seeing it now affect things on a much bigger scale, but these are things in land displacement and disasters and eco anxiety are all things that I think have been felt in many communities for a really long time. And so I think it's important to center the voices of Indigenous young people and um, all of our Indigenous activists who have been doing this work for a long, long, long time. I think that as much as the conversation perhaps has shifted maybe into more main stream spaces, it seems to be much more happening, but there have been active protests and active efforts, and there are lots of things I think that are ongoing. So it's just important that we are making sure that we're uplifting them and perhaps using our own powers and privileges to make sure that the voices of other people are being heard rather than trying to make that our voice while speaking their stories, I think is very, very important as well. And then I think just also like the land and Mother Earth is she's alive, and so if we keep putting life and love back into her, she can and she will heal. I know when I was younger, we were all so worried about the ozone layer, but it's actually been it's healing and it's repairing and things are working, but we don't hear about those positive things as well, and so it's just kind of proof that our land is alive, and it's important that we also speak positivity and we don't fall into that hopelessness because that negativity and that manifestation of death affects not just our own growth, but also the growth of kind of everyone and everything around us. And so she's alive, and so we have to just love her, even though lots of things are happening and going on.
Love that. And thank you for the reminder about the ozone. Yeah, you're right. We used to talk about it. And then, instead of focusing on the positive, we tend to go towards the negative side, which leads me kind of to the next question. And Brittany, this is for you. How does the Indigenous worldview differ from the Western kind of fear based approach to climate change? How can reconnecting be a form of mental health treatment?
Yeah, this fear mongering, fear-based approach that we have to learning and building awareness around the climate emergency and climate crisis that we find ourselves in. Sure, it may be effective to get people out onto the streets protesting, to contact their representatives, to vote people into power who care about the environment, right? That can be effective, but then you're also instilling anxiety in every single person as well. And I think when we reframe what is happening with an Indigenous lens, sure, the impact is greater because of, our inherent connection and intertwinement with the land. Like in my community, we still live off of the land. We rely on hunting and gathering to supplement our groceries. Our pharmacy is a forest. The forest is our relative, right? So when we reframe the climate emergency now, suddenly it's not just how it's affecting me as a two-legged, as a human, but more so how it's affecting all of my relatives, in the world. And sure, that can seem to add on to it, but when you reframe it with putting yourself not at the center of it, I think you're able to approach it with a lot more love and care. When we focus more so on how much we love the environment rather than how much fear we have in the devastating effects of climate change, I think we can do a lot more, and without having to carry this burden of eco anxiety around with us that just weighs us down in our everyday life. And with an Indigenous perspective, again, it's very community centered too, and realizing that you are just one part, right? And yes, like drops in the water equal an ocean, but it's also realizing that when you work together with a community and you share the burden with the community, the weight becomes a lot less to carry, right? And so, yeah, I think just reframing the whole climate emergency as not just, oh, what's going to affect me, what's going to happen in 10 years, but more so focusing on the land as your relative, and saying like, I really love trees, and I do. Like I hug trees every time I go on a walk and everything like that. There's this one tree that just really loves hugs, and you could like feel it and everything. And that sounds really like woo kind of thing and stuff, but I genuinely believe and know, I mean, we have literally studied the interconnectedness of trees globally, right? And everything. But when we can then focus on the love that you have for the land, you'll want to protect it without having to carry eco anxiety with you. So I think when we change our approach to how we think about climate change and the changing of the world and stuff, there's also a larger understanding too, when you decenter yourself within this larger conversation of climate change, that in the end, the earth will be okay. The land will be okay. Sure, it might take the crumbling of this world that we live in, but I think that's necessary. I mean, it's not a happy world, we have to work to feed ourselves, and to live with a roof over our head. And and some people can't even do that, and stuff. And the mental health crises, the drug crises, the broken family structures and everything, I think when we look at the big picture, and no matter what happens, the land will be okay. And when we think about that, I think for me at least, that lessens my climate and eco anxiety, which is maybe a little bit funny, but that's what works for me.
Hey, if that works for you, stick with it for sure. We're going to go to a quick ad break and we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Angelica with Jack.org. Right now, too many young people are struggling with their mental health and they don't always know where to turn. Every donation to Jack.org helps change that. And right now, there's a limited time bonus. Every $25 donation enters you to win a luxury wellness getaway for two, valued at over $10,000, thanks to our friends at Salty Retreats. Visit jack.org/salty to enter.
And we are back. I'm going to throw a question out to Ashley and Chelsea with your work with young people. How do you two support your peers? What's your go-to move to practice care for yourself while also advocating for change?
For sure. So I think to support our peers, I see it as like three little ways. I think that it's important to listen to them and to actively listen to them for their concerns, because sometimes, again, we might feel like we have a lot of control, but just being there, just being able to rant to someone, getting that off your chest, having those feelings being validated, can go a long way. And just having those conversations, and again, making it less overwhelming, making it feel like we're not alone. So I think having those conversations and being able to actively listen to them is like the first step of being supportive, but then also asking them what they need and how you can help, instead of just assuming and guessing what it is that they want from you. It might be they just want to rant. It might be they want you to go to a protest with them, or whatever that looks like. But just making sure that you're asking them and providing that support, but that support of what they are looking for, and not just assuming what the support is. And then for the second part of the question, my go-to move for self-care, it touches back to what Chelsea and Brittany were saying a while ago, but I think having that community to make it feel less daunting when we are advocating for change together. So for example, if we there's an issue in our community and we want to write emails to our city councilor, if we craft that email together, if we go to a cafe and buy a fun little treat while we are writing that email, or if we're going to a protest, if we're having a craft night and we're making protest signs together. So having that community, adding in our creativity, can just make it feel less daunting when we're advocating for change, but then also on the other side for taking that self care and taking that time to rest and recharge. So we're not burning out because we can't pour from that empty cup. We have to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves while we're also dealing with this advocacy work, and rest is productive as well. And I think sometimes we feel like, oh, I have to be the one to take this change, but it's okay to be that supporter as well. It's okay to let someone else take the lead, and kind of like Brittany was saying a while ago, like decenter yourself and be like, okay, here's the movement. If I'm gonna let Brittany take charge for now, and then after a little bit, I'll take charge, and we kind of have that working together relationship. Because we're again, we have to have that community vibe, so that we can work towards creating that change.
Yeah, that leads me really nicely into kind of what I was going to say is just kind of first always I try to validate and remind my friends that all forms of advocacy are valid and are okay and are needed. Not everyone is going to be able to go to protests. Not everybody can be doing all of the things, or else we won't be able to do them all. And so we need people who are willing to show up in different ways and who have different capacities and skills. And I think in the time of hardship, it's remember we also remember art is also advocacy and self-expression, and so remembering however you choose to advocate and show up and share your voice is just as valid, even if it looks different for other people. um, and then just I think my friends and I, we try to really ground ourselves. I know I'm neurodivergent, so oftentimes I need a fact to kind of put my feet on the ground. As much as I love everything, I need like something. And so one thing we always try to do is we pay attention and recognize that the panic and the anxiety that we're feeling is like literally manufactured for us to be carrying the weight of systemic oppression and colonization. And so um, we can always say that. I feel like every day we're like, okay, but it's the patriarchy and it's this colonization. And so let's take a step back here and just kind of remember that a lot of stuff that gets shared and can be reproduced online are constructed in moral panics. And so there's lots of things that we see online. And most importantly, we just go outside. We put our phones away and we leave the house. I think our parents are always saying, it's always those damn phones. And it's starting to feel like maybe they're right, because I'm feeling that a lot. Even just scrolling on apps, I feel myself like almost short circuiting because of all the short form content. I'm having to move on so much, and I'm watching immense tragedies and the world burning down, and then a video of someone laughing and committing like a funny little bit. And that's just not normal. So I think just realizing that we're living in a new normal. No one knows quite how to deal with it. And so just spending time with people, and then yeah, just go outside and connect to land and look for that connection is very important.
I love that. And I'm still stuck. I was like, whoa, did you just say maybe your parents are right? I'm going to repeat that back to my now adult kids.
I have no shame in admitting that perhaps that our elders, they have some knowledge, and so we might not want to listen at those moments. I can say that my mom saying it's those phones, perhaps she is correct, because when I put it
Yes.
down, I do feel better. So it's important that we do give our elders a little bit of credit, because it is those phones. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And love what you're saying, right? I mean, obviously I'm of a different generation, and we had to experience a lot of boredom, right? So because we didn't have that instant information at our fingertips, and quite often parents would say, go outside, go get lost in that forest, do whatever, and not worry so much about whether you're getting hurt, helicopter do. And quite often we did, but we were okay. But it was that connection. So I hear a lot of themes of, connection to nature, putting down the phones. Everyone brings something different for sure. Um, Brittany, for youth who feel paralyzed by the scale of the crisis, as we've talked about, like it can be really, really overwhelming, and all the negative information we receive, what's the one action they can take to help them feel safe? I mean, there's probably a lot, but what's one that you?
Um, just knowing and trusting that people are out there doing the work right now.
Yes.
When I started working in the international climate space, I kind of was thrown into the deep end. I was nominated into the role as the North American Youth Delegate Knowledge Holder for the
Wow.
UNFCCC. So I suddenly found myself at COP, and while incredibly overwhelming, I was largely involved with the Youth Roundtable and the Indigenous Peoples Caucus, and basically, I found that globally there are so many amazing minds at work currently. And it's their full-time job, it's their full-time thing, it's their passion, it's what they care about. And they are constantly working to find avenues in which we can mitigate the effects of climate change. We can lessen the impacts of climate events on communities, and we can build better policies and infrastructure to withstand the changing climate, but also to ensure that we don't make things worse. There's people working all over the place. And I think that brought me a lot of hope because it can feel like the entire world is on your shoulders. Again, we live in a very individualistic society, but it isn't. There are so many people working, and they're doing such cool advocacy and community and grassroots work. Like they're pursuing legal personhood, like getting rivers and forests and everything recognized as persons under legislation as a means of protection. You have folks who are literally building and innovating technology to help us build better cities and better communities. You have Indigenous folks who are currently defending land and are tying themselves to trees and
Mm-hmm.
and getting in the way of industry exploitation and expansion, and stuff. And they're putting themselves on the front lines in order to protect their relative, the land relative, our four-legged, our winged relatives, our insect relatives. So there's just so much wonderful work happening. It doesn't all have to land on you, and it's not up to you to solve it. So I think that really helped me. And especially like it also inspired me to continue doing the work because I want to join those folks. I want to join the work. And I bring something special to the table, as does every single person, because of the way we grew up, of our culture and what we learned and our teachings, but also just our strengths and the skills that we have. Like every person belongs at the table when we're talking about climate change mitigation.
I love the positivity of this entire group. Amazing. And I'll tell you, what I often say this, what gives me hope, very similar, Brittany, to what you're saying, is you, all three of you. I mean, the young people that I get to talk with all the time, best part of my job, but also when people are like, oh, this is happening, this is like all these different bad things. I'm like, yeah, but I talk to a lot of really, really smart, dedicated, passionate young people. So we're going to be just fine. Just like you said, there's a lot of good minds at work on this. I want to throw it out to the entire group. Today's Earth Day, and we focus on it, and we're like, great, we double down. But how can we keep the momentum going beyond today and encourage young people to stay involved in climate action? Any thoughts?
I can go. I think there's the things that we have been told our whole lives that we're like, oh, here's like the basic things, like bringing a reusable water bottle instead of buying plastic ones, or like reusable straws or cutlery when going out, bringing your takeout containers instead of getting plastic ones or disposable ones, or like now that the weather's getting nicer, going for walks and biking or carpooling and taking transit instead of being all in our individual cars. So there's all of those little things that we can do. But also, I think going back to that community piece is just being able to look up local initiatives that are happening in your community. So I know here there's a lot of times where they're trying to build infrastructure in the community, and we're bulldozing a bunch of trees or things like that. But then there's also like the other side where there's an organization that I was a part of a few years ago that every summer and spring they go and plant trees. So being able to get involved in those little things as well. So seeing what's in your community and being able to work with them. So then again, it's not all on you to be like, oh, I need to solve this whole crisis, but then joining a group that's already working towards making that positive change and being like, okay, I can take 2 hours and go plant trees. Like that's not super stressful on my back. So being able to do that sort of work as well.
And we keep mentioning community too, but I think sometimes people feel lost as to what that means. Like, what does it mean to go and get involved in your community, and what does community exactly mean? And I feel like there's also a lot of conversations lately about third spaces. And so I think it's really important that we create and access those third spaces. So places like libraries, community gardens have free plots so you can go and plant at, access and engage at any rec centers. Those are programs that if they don't get enough engagement, unfortunately, they lose funding. And so that's something that is such a great resource that we can continue to increase to try to access.
Yeah, for sure. So what can young people and anyone listening do continue the action going forward? Yeah, just as Ashley was mentioning, being very mindful of, your impact, however, like also understanding that the large portion of that impact is from industry, and it's something kind of out of your hands and everything, unless you're going to protest, unless you're literally like contacting your representatives about your concerns about a certain industry. Like yeah, like doing small actions like that add up, especially when we're all doing those actions. Another thing is educating yourself about, things that have become normalized. AI is a big thing right now. And while AI is an incredibly important and useful tool in certain industries like medicine, like medical, health and hospitals and everything like that, that's an incredible diagnostic tool. It's also, I don't think it needs to belong in our everyday life, right? We were doing just fine without AI. I don't think we need AI to build lists, to do our homework, to tell us how to feel, tell us how to respond to messages. I also don't think we need to be making images and videos of ourselves using AI, because AI has such a detrimental impact to the environment, but also to our mental health as well. And our ability to for our brains to continue building new connections. That's not going to happen if you're just handing off every little question to AI and everything, because AI uses a lot of power, a lot of water. It only uses drinking water, like fresh drinking water, to cool down its systems. It can't use anything mineralized, so it can't use like sewage water or like salt water or anything like that, because that would mess with the data centers. And not to mention that the data centers are infringing on Indigenous lands. They're targeting Indigenous lands first and foremost to build these massive data centers where there's such a heavy environmental impact and everything. So just don't use it, of course. And we were doing just fine without it. We can continue doing fine without it and everything. So just like little things like that have become so normalized, like buying a new iPhone every year, or the latest technology too. Like that's not great for the environment. Just being very mindful of like these things that have been so normalized and that everyone does. So I should be fine to do. Again, you're a drop in the ocean, but you also matter as well. So
Collectively, it matters for sure. I love that mindfulness for sure. We are going to jump into a segment we call Fact or Fiction. And I think I can even answer this one here, but I'm going to throw it to the group. Fact or fiction? Is it too late to stop the worst of the climate change?
My answer is going to be very funny, but climate change can always be worse. So yes, we are seeing devastating effects. We're seeing increasingly common extreme climate events that are impacting communities who do not have the infrastructure in place to withstand those. We're seeing a large migration of people. We're now having climate refugees, right? And yeah, we don't have the political stability to support those refugees, right? In this in this current political landscape and everything. So yes, there are massive impacts, and right now it could seem like it's too late. And unfortunately, in some instances, it is too late. We can't get back what like the changes that we've been observing, but we can do a lot to help lessen the human impact, right? And so that is the building of stronger communities, of being a good community member too. We all want community, but what does being a good community member is look like? It means reaching out to folks who have been impacted, volunteering at shelters when there's wildfires and there's a mass evacuation. It means sharing about different, like climate events like impacting folks, but also about initiatives that are aiming to help those climate refugees. And then, yeah, so is like I think if we are feeling hopeless and that there's nothing we can do to stop climate change from becoming worse, then that leads to inaction, and that's the opposite of what we need, right? And stuff. So always have hope that even though the world has changed and is currently changing, that there is hope that we can do something better, right? That we can be better for this planet, this beautiful planet that we live on and live through.
Yeah, and I think also too, like it's the entire point of us to feel helpless and to think that we are at the worst of it. I mentioned before moral panic. This is a construction of a moral panic that it's too late to stop the worst of climate change. That mindset is really important because it then makes it easier to then take advantage of everything and then absorb all of the land from spaces because people are not taking action. Um, and then I think what I was going to say before too, just about like using reusable supplies and everything, it's important too that when you're not able to take those actions, that you're not carrying guilt for those things either. I know myself sometimes I cannot carry a cup all day long, and so sometimes it is in the best decision in my own mental health to use a takeaway cup that I'm throwing out for a thing, or making sure I'm recycling, and so calling on your cities to increase access to recycling and green bins and all of those things. But if there are times where you need to not maybe take the most eco-friendly route, don't carry that guilt as well, because that's not doing anything, and it's going to make it 10 times harder for yourself to kind of take those steps
100%.
forward.
Well, Maisie, we are coming to the very end, and this is our final question that we ask everyone on Jack Amplified. It's a real light question. I'm kidding. It's a pretty heavy question. And we're going to start with you, Ashley, with this. Then we'll go to Brittany and Chelsea. You'll have the last word. No reason for that order, just how I saw you on the screen. So starting with Ashley, what are your hopes for the future of youth mental health in Canada? And again, there's no right or wrong. These are your thoughts.
For sure. So I hope that one day every youth feels safe and comfortable talking about their mental health and can get that access and support that is right for them in an accessible way and an affordable way, so they can get care in their maiden language. They can get that care that is culturally supportive, that is inclusive of any identity they fall in, and all of that. But in order for all of that to happen at the forefront, we need to make sure that we have our structural changes so that the policies are created and the changes are made so that those conversations and mental health is prioritized and it's able to happen.
Yes. My hope for the future of mental health in Canada is to build a better world in which we can live, in which our mental health doesn't suffer in. So that means creating wider access to social programming to that can help build better family structures. That means building more green spaces and third spaces for folks to be able to access nature, because again, nature, when we interact with nature, it literally grounds us. But then also, again, as Ashley mentioned, at the policy level of ensuring that we have policies in place that protect our marginalized communities and identities, and that we have like cultural specific programming accessible for folks, and that, just like a better world, I think, in which there's more access and barriers, I think, will be incredible for folks' mental health in Canada.
Love it. Chelsea, final word. Your
Oh
hopes.
man. Yeah, I think the hope is just in order for youth mental health in Canada to be successful and addressed, we need to have effective and supportive mental health treatment across the board for all of our relatives, whether that be those who have housing or experiencing homelessness and living and sleeping rough on the streets, or experiencing and struggling with addictions and poverty and all of those things. We all deserve access to mental health care, and we deserve an intersectional approach. I think is very important to add on. We always talk about importance of inclusion, and we can mention everything, but even within those individual identities, there's so many intersections. So intersectionality is extremely important. And just the recognition, I think, and validation of mental health and mental well-being as a social determinant of health, I think is very, very important. And just recognizing that we can't quite improve mental health until we have a solid ground for all of us to stand on. And in our current day, we don't quite have that. And so it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of steps and community and returning to connection and continuously resisting the structures in which we live in and all of the social constructions. And it's a long, long journey. But I think, yeah, just it's nice to see the conversation now, because we're all kind of taking acknowledgement of it, and this conversation is happening so much more. And so I'm hopeful that things will be able to go forward in a good way. And I think our youth are our future, and so we need to make sure that we're empowering them so that we can continue to show up in spaces and make that change.
Love that. A great space to end on, great note to end on. I want to thank all of you, I mean, beyond today, beyond Earth Day, for all you are doing to make this world a better place, and for your contributions today and your contributions every day. Thanks so much for your time. It's been wonderful chatting with you. You're always welcome back on Jack Amplified. Thank you for giving me hope and inspiration on Earth Day and every day. Well, listen, what a great group of young, powerful leaders that we brought on today. I mean, there's so many different themes to walk through, but this was a podcast of hope, right? In a topic that often kind of leaves us in despair. All three of our young leaders were talking about being hopeful, about connecting to community, about the power of many people together, your actions, and the power of inaction as well. But it's a very hopeful podcast talking about we can and need to do better, and to recognize some of the wonderful things that are already being done. Brittany spoke to as well the brilliant people around the world that are paying attention to this. So great things are happening day in, day out, and the passion of our young people and how brilliant they are. I spoke of that. That really tells me we are in good hands, but we need to support that. We need to put the right resources towards this, and the world can and will be a better place moving forward. Thank you to everyone for joining us this week. I encourage you to like, rate, and subscribe to the podcast, share it widely, and we'll see you next time on Jack Amplified.